You're listening to another episode of Faces of Our Cities. I'm your host, Jesse. Today, we're talking with Dave Vasko. Now, Dave and I met, like many people in my life that I've met, when I was working for a company in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Dave was, if I remember right, Dave, you were like the head of R&D for a company called Rockwell Automation. Dave was known in the company as the imagination guy. I never saw Dave in his office, but when I thought of Dave in his office, I just assumed it was like this laboratory of like all these experiments that he was running, or things like ripped apart and then put back together, something like that. And to be honest, Dave, I always figured that was also what you were like as a child, that there was just like radios pulled apart, and like that you were probably the type that just wanted to understand how things worked, and like you probably could have been the host of How It's Made. How were you as a child? Is that fair?
Yeah, that's probably not too far from the truth. I remember taking my parents' intercom apart and wiring it into my guitar amplifier so I could play Black Sabbath and just overdrive it when I was young. But yeah, I was always inquisitive and always liked to play things, take things apart, put things together. I remember my dad took a lawn spreader apart and he painted it and he laid it on the floor and told me to put it back together when I was young. And I went down there and put it together, and it's like, oh, I didn't think I could do it, but if he thought I could do it, I thought I could.
That's great. Well, Dave and the first time at least I remember meeting Dave, you were actually coming into our recording studio to record your own podcast called State of the Industry.
Yep, that's it.
And really about manufacturing, automation, kind of hot topics. What always surprised me is that you were the interviewer. Not because you couldn't interview, but because I was like, this is the guy that has the answers, like not these other people. Like Dave is the one who's like, somebody else should be asking Dave all these questions. But you were either way. It was a wonderful podcast. Dave, for our audience, help everyone understand the short, brief version of your work history. I know that doesn't encompass all of who you are, but before becoming the head of R&D for Rockwell, what was your life like work-wise?
Yeah, well, first, let me just thank you for all your help with the podcast. I mean, that was something that was the first one the Rockwell did. They asked me to be the guinea pig, and I'll be honest, I always say yes. I always try things, and Jesse, you made it so easy to do and comforting. And you helped me get through a lot of those interviews, and I thank you so much for that. Career-wise, I've always just enjoyed learning new things. So personally, I'm a serial hobbyist. I love to dive into something new I've never tried, try it, and then move on to something else when it gets the time I have to quit my job. And at work, that's kind of what it's like too. So I started off in hardware engineering. I always wanted to design computers, and unfortunately, I was born a couple of years too late. So when I graduated, most of the seats for computer designers were gone. But Rockwell was starting a new industrial computer division, and I went ahead and interviewed. I got the job and was able to design computers for Rockwell, and that was really exciting times. We I did a lot of the hardware designs. I went on to do graduate work for software and systems, and did some work in functional safety, and actually pioneered a lot of the technologies there. And that was just an amazing experience. We wanted to use computers and computer networks to keep people safe around hazardous machines, and it had never been done. We're using a lot of mechanical things to do that. And it was very problematic, and people would still get hurt, and it didn't really work. So we went to Germany to the certification agencies, and I talked to them, and there was no real way to certify equipment. So we had to go to the institutes in Germany. I went to the institute, and they said, there's nothing been published, but would you be willing to write a book on that? So I co-authored a book with one of the institutes in Germany. We published it. It was then a published work. We could then certify against that, and we are able to introduce safety systems to actually keep people safe. And so it's always been kind of evolving. I think at Rockwell, I worked there 38 years, and it was more like 7 careers to me, because everything would change and I would get a chance to try something new. I had a project down in Australia for 3 years, went back and forth, and we automated a steel production line using autonomous agents and AI and digital twins and all these cool technologies that we were developing at the time. And but it's been an incredible experience. And finally, with R&D, I've had a chance to manage people, and the R&D for the corporation, the R&D labs, and I think that is so interesting to do and to help people um, better develop themselves, to make them more clear in how they're explaining things and make their work more impactful.
So was Rockwell the only place you ever worked company wise?
No, I worked before that at a company called Technicare, which was then bought by Johnson& and Johnson, doing CAT scanners and MRI scanners. And I
Okay.
did that for five
Okay.
years, and
Okay.
really interesting work. And that really laid a foundation of a lot of basic engineering that I used when I came to Rockwell. When I came to Rockwell, I wanted to design computers. I had no credentials, even though I knew I could design them. So I
Yeah.
actually I got a bunch of no's. I went down to my basement. I designed a computer, built the computer, and then on the interview, I took my schematics, I took my pictures, I took everything with me and my source code, and I laid it on the table. And the interview was so easy because all we did was talk about everything I'd done, and I was familiar with it, and it was a fun interview. But if even though if you think you could do it, maybe people won't believe you. So you have to demonstrate it. That's kind of one of the lessons I learned, and it really
Hmm.
paid off.
We're gonna come back to that at the end of this podcast as one of your tidbits to take away.
Yeah,
Even though you think you can do it, prove that you can, and then maybe you'll get the job. Wow, really an incredible career. It's always amazing to me to get to meet someone like you that really did stay in a place for that long. I think in my generation, it's almost a terrifying idea to stay at a company for that long and consider that you might be doing the same job for that long. But hearing, that you went, really, it felt like 7 different careers, and you got to expand so much and build and grow so much. I think that's one of those things that can happen when you're at a company that size.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that's I planned on staying there 5 years. And to be honest, I had 7 different careers. I was at each one of those probably about 5 years, and that's
Mm.
the last one was a little longer, but the last one kind of grew with me. So I was there in the last job for 12 years, but it really grew to almost 3 different jobs when by the time I finished it up.
If you had to think back to like all of those different roles that you played, do you
Mhm.
have one that you love the most?
No, the last one was definitely the best. Doing the R&D. I did enjoy early in my career working in Australia and doing the work there. And I did have part of my career work. It seemed to kind of stall where I wasn't really growing, and I ended up going back to grad school. I used that opportunity where I felt a little bit stalled in the career to go back to grad school, and so you just have to look for those opportunities, and when they come, and make the most of those.
Good for you for seeing that, right? Most people would have quit rather than used it as an excuse to challenge themselves in a different part of their life. So
You do have a lot of control over your career and where it's going. I had one point where the job wasn't right. They offered me 4 different jobs within Rockwell, and none of them really worked for me. And I came back and said, "Here's what I think needs to be done. Here's a job where there's a gap. I think I could do it. I think I can move things along, and have benefit for the company." And they said, "Yeah, we like that. Do that."
that's awesome. You made a comment about being a serial hobbyist. So I know that you cycle because I just saw you post about you being in Arizona, and we chit chatted just a tiny bit about some of your upcoming trips. I know that you're a photographer. What other hobbies do you have?
There's a ton. So I play with cars. So I used to do solo competition where you go off in time trial, and did that. Traveled around regionally and nationally for that, and that was a lot of fun. Campaigned a Miata I had and drove another car for somebody else, and it was a lot of fun. But I'll be honest, the more serious I got, the less fun it got. You just you're just chasing for that extra, that 1/10 of a second, and um, it got less fun as we went.
Wait. Sorry. We're not talking about like model cars. We're talking about like real cars.
Real cars, yeah,
Like
real cars,
racing them.
yep, yep.
Like drag racing or like stock car racing? Like Mario Kart style? Like what was this?
It's called Solo 2 or autocross, and you basically go on a parking lot, a old airfield. We used to love the World War II concrete because it was so sticky, and you would take a car out there and you go on a course, and the course is set up very, very tight. So you're turning a lot. You could be turning almost every second. And the speeds, they try to keep the speeds down relatively slow, under 70, but it's very, very tight, and you're trying to just go that little bit faster. And it's a ball. People do it with all kind of cars.
Have you ever seen the movie Tokyo Drift?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know how to do you know how to drift?
I
Did you
am
ever
not a
do
big
that?
not a big drifter, but I could definitely hold the outside of the car out and go around.
This is awesome.
That's not the fastest way around a course, but you could do that. To be honest, and you could do that on any car. You take even like an underpowered Miata, and you put it at the limit and just give it a little more throttle, and the back's going to come out.
Hmm. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So racing cars. What else do you
Yep.
got? What other hobbies?
I used to scuba dive. So somebody invited me to a scuba diving, like a splash party where you go in there to a pool, you blow bubbles, and I liked that. And I went ahead and got certified, and then I went and became an advanced and a rescue diver into the deep dives, and finally became a dive master. And I used to teach classes and teach other people how to scuba dive. And I love to do a lot of underwater photography, and even with snorkeling. I think I love to snorkel because you can still get down 35, 40 feet snorkeling, and I can take a camera and I could do that all day. Where diving you can only do for about an hour a day.
Okay. What else? I feel like I know
Well,
there's
the,
more.
yeah, the photography was fun. I used to go out, and I was photographer for a pre-professional ballet company, and ballet is
Huh.
just brutal because people are moving. There's low light. I shot 5,000 pictures the first event. Zero turned out. So I had to work at it, and it was the worst time I've had. But I got some incredible pictures. You have to calibrate your finger with a beat. You have to be able to understand you only take pictures at the beat. You have to hit the button before the beat. It took me probably a few months to actually get that synced up, because anytime in between, the dancers look funny. Their movements are only supposed to be precise on the beats. And then I had to really work on the low light conditions, and be able to use prime lenses during rehearsals to get the close shots, and then use some other lenses later, and then post process the heck out of things just to get the noise and to get to look like anything good.
Interesting. I had no idea. Was the photographing ballerinas a recent thing in the last
No,
like
that
decade or two?
yeah, it was about probably 15 years ago. Yeah,
Okay, so we still had digital cameras, but
yeah, not like they are today. Like they are today, I
hmm,
think I'd be four stops better, so it would be a lot easier to do. At the time, it was just you were just able to do it, but boy, it was rough. It was rough.
huh. Wow, that's impressive. How did you get into that? I'm just curious. Was that just did you have a daughter that was a ballerina or just a friend and you're like, I could do this?
Yeah, my daughters were involved in dance, and they've been involved in the company, and they were looking for people to help. And I just felt that the performances were just amazing. They were actually typically original ballets. Many times the music was original, and they didn't really have a good photographic record of it. And I wanted to capture that, and I thought it was just so incredible. So that's the reason I did it. And then it was something for the dancers to have. Um, Many of the dancers from that have gone on to become professionals in that company, and yeah, it a lot of hard work. Really amazed by what they went through, and I'm amazed by the creative process. The I remember we're filming the dance, and they're going to do video recording of it, and we're 45 minutes from the recording of it, and they're still changing the composition, changing, adding a few measures here, changing the cues, because it all comes together. You have to get everything synced up, and it takes time for things to work. But I just was amazed how cool the theater people were, the dancers at that age were under that pressure.
That's really interesting. That's some insight I never would have expected. I would have thought that they would have had it set weeks in advance and had been just practicing the exact same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure they, to a certain extent, is what they're doing. But yeah, to be changing it 45 minutes before the performance is really surprising and terrifying.
Yeah. Some things you could change, but I mean, for the venue itself, when you're performing at the venue, particularly with the special effects, it may take some time. It may take a second or two to roll in. So you have to adjust the music, the cues accordingly.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Sure. Huh. Any hobbies that you recently started in your retirement?
So, not. I've come back to some. The, I've come back to the bikes. I've been coming back to bicycling a lot more. I used to be very competitive. I did the racing and did all that, and I've come back more. Still, maybe a high level of fitness, but to do that more. I've done more with the cars. I'm doing more of track days these days, with going out and like Road America and doing events at speed. And then I do the winter autocross series, where we go up there in the winter and we drive during the winter. We just have a ball. It's always snow, ice. It's very, very changed conditions. Even run to run, it changes. And then I've been trying to perfect my espresso. So about 16 years ago, I had the most fantastic shot of espresso in Sicily, and I've been trying to duplicate it. So I actually have been able to find the coffee that they use just from taste. I've been able to get the equipment and refine my skills. I'm getting closer and closer to what I tasted some 16 years ago, and that's going to be a constant battle to get that perfected.
Man, what can you tell us where it was that you had that? I feel like people are good. If you were saying that it was so good and you've been trying for this long to perfect it and get back to it, where was this at that you had this amazing espresso?
It was Catania, Sicily, and it was at a university. So just a university coffee shop, but they were pulling probably 2,000 to 5,000 shots a day. So they really refined it. The coffee was actually very pedestrian. It was a Lavazza Rosa, something that is very, very common there, but it was done in such a way that if you ever had just remarkable chocolate and compare that to a Hershey bar, that's the difference. It was so rich and had oils that just came out of it, and the aftertaste lasted for like an hour. And yeah, that was quite an experience. And we were in Sicily, and Sicily's very warm, and we were in a cool spell there where it was about 40 degrees, and the conference room we were meeting had windows that didn't close. My hotel room had a window that didn't close. I was actually frozen just like a popsicle the entire time.
Wow. Okay, I add that to my bucket list of places to check out one day. University coffee shop in Sicily.
Yeah.
What hobby do you think your daughters would have like rolled their eyes at or been like, "Wait, you're doing what? You're trying to figure out what? What's the weirdest hobby that your daughters think you had at one time in your life as they knew you?"
Oh, that's I don't know. Maybe music. I don't think they think I'm musically talented. I'm not, to be honest. But I think maybe the music element, the piano or guitar.
I was going to say, do you play any instruments?
Yeah, I do play guitar and I play piano, and not very well. I put more time into it, and I've got less out of it, but it is enjoyment, so that's what counts. I mean, they roll
Okay.
their eyes at me,
Okay.
but particularly if I were to sing, then it really goes downhill from there.
What's so funny is I like knowing you, I already know that like your level of good is most people's level of perfection. And so like if you say like you're not very good at it, you're still probably like what someone would sound like if they had been practicing for 10 years probably. And so I appreciate the humility, but I can't wait to like be at a racetrack and you pull out a guitar and start just like hammering away at Black Sabbath.
uh, you'd probably be disappointed, but I do enjoy music.
Well, Dave, this has been great. Thank you so much. Now, before we wrap this up, I always try to give our listeners a couple of like solid life hacks with all of your experiences, with all of your hobbies. What would you be willing to share with our audience?
Sure. So I'll give you a few. So, Jesse, I know you travel quite a bit, and one of the things that frustrates me with their travel is um, people carry-on bags on, which is fine. I mean, in particular, if you're international, you want to have that bag in hand in case things go south. But they always seem to put the bag on the same side of the plane they're on, and so they have to get up, they have to turn 180 degrees, they have to open the bin, they have to find their bag and move it on. I always put it on the other side and put it just about a foot ahead of you. So you're sitting there, somebody's already opened the bin for you. You can see your bag, you can stand up, you grab the bag and go. And I think if we all could do that, we'd save 5 or 10 minutes unloading that plane. So that's my one life hack for travel is think about putting that
Okay.
bag on the other side about a foot or two in front, and you'll get off there a lot quicker.
I want to just piggyback off that because I feel like if we can get people to do that, and I have someone once told me on an airplane that the aisle seats benefit is having the aisle, the window seats benefit is having the window, the middle seats benefit is having two armrests. So back off if you're on one of the outside seats, back off those armrests. That's the middle seats benefit. And so I feel like if we can get people on the same page about that, and where they put their bag, we could change air travel for the better.
Absolutely agree. If you have that middle seat, that's yours. And if I'm on the aisle or I'm on the window, I'm not touching those armrests because those are yours. I totally agree with you there, Jesse.
Okay, what else you got for us?
So, as far as work, I mean, one thing I would suggest, and this is both from both sides of being a manager of people or being an employee, talk to your boss. Tell them what you're looking for. I mean, first off, you have to do your job. Whatever your job is, do your job. Make sure you're killing it. But tell your boss what you're looking for. And when I was looking to be more involved, I wanted to become a principal engineer. I told my boss probably 5 years at a time what I wanted to do. And I told him what sort of assignments that I was looking for. And they couldn't always get me assignments like that, but when they could, they made sure they came my way. So that's something that you could do. And then as a manager, you're trying to develop people, and if you have no idea what they want to do, it's very difficult to develop them. If you have those good conversations, you can actually help them in their career, and they're going to be more productive. It's going to help them to soften the rough edges or develop where they need to develop. So that's a big thing. I have always enjoyed performance reviews. I'm probably the oddball there, but I'd rather know where my shortcomings are and be able to take some action steps. And then for me, it was like Christmas. I had things I want to develop. I can go in and say, okay, I want to learn this. Can you send me to this training class? Can you get me this piece of software? Whatever those things are. Um, and use that as a way to develop it. So use those performance reviews and share what your goals are, what you want to do.
That's really good. I think, and being able to find a manager who uh, doesn't hold those shortcomings against you, right? What would you say to a manager who's newly managing people, knowing, hey, like this is really your job now, as someone who didn't manage people and then went into it. Did you get any advice from other people that manage people, like, Dave, this is what you got to do? Um, Anything like that? Anything you can share?
Oh, absolutely. So my first job managing, my boss did something very unique. So he made me a manager, and then he assigned me work, and he would watch when I would leave the office. And if I was leaving the office later, he would the next day assign me more work and more work and more work until it was just devastating. And he was trying to teach me to delegate, because if I was trying to do everything myself, I was doing it wrong. So he was going to sit there and put stuff on me until I started delegating it to my people, and that was a good lesson. I think as a maybe if you're a high contributor within a company, and you become a manager, you have to realize that you're no longer judged on those contributions. You're judged on how well you could develop your employees, how well they can develop. If they could be doing the job for you, if they could be doing any work you do, it's in their best interest to actually do that, to be able to develop, to be able to stretch, and don't be afraid to do that. And then realize you're not going to be the expert in everything anymore. You might be a good coach, somebody that helps them assess what they're doing, but you're no longer the expert. That's not what you're getting paid to do. You're getting paid to actually develop those people, and it takes a little while to get into that mindset, but it's worthwhile, and then you'll see remarkable things happen. You'll see, by trusting employees, I've had, particularly in research, I've had people come to me and with ideas that sound absolutely crazy, and it takes, you got to bite your tongue and say, okay, let's give it a shot. If you think that can be done, let's see if we can do that. And many times they can, and sometimes they can't, but that's okay, because there's a learning experience involved. And just to have that confidence in them and letting them try those things, and seeing some remarkable things that I thought were surely impossible come to life is just so rewarding.
Mm. That is an awesome, awesome takeaway. Thank you so much for that. I have one more question for you, but before I ask it, is there anything else that you had on your list that you wanted to share with us?
Yeah, possibly. I think don't be afraid to reach. Don't be afraid of things. Just because something has never been done doesn't mean it's impossible. I know with the podcast that we did, I would ask guests, and I've never had anybody turn me down. And I thought that's incredible, and people enjoyed doing them. I thought, this person doesn't know me. I know, like with Dean Kamen, we asked Dean, and we tried to schedule it. We ended up coming out to his house and doing the uh, the podcast at his house. Then we went out for beer and pizza after his favorite pizza place, and it was just this great experience. But don't be afraid to stretch. Don't be afraid to try things that haven't been tried, because that's okay, and that's part of it. And then question things. Conventional wisdom isn't always wise. So if you don't understand something, try to understand why it's being done, why it's this way. I know, in my career, in personal life, I've seen so many things that have been done I don't understand, and you kind of get into it. It's like, oh, that everybody has been doing it wrong for a long time, and that's that's part of it. But don't be afraid to question those things.
Yeah, yeah. To that point about asking why, for definitely there's a time and a space for it. I don't want to get super into it, but I worked for a tech company last year, for a tech startup, and the mentality very much was, don't let perfect be the enemy of good, right? Like,
Yep.
we just need to get things done and execute. And that's what's needed at that time. As someone whose like job is to make sure things are as perfect as they could be, I struggled with it a lot, but also recognize that, hey, like 3 to 5 years from now, like, some of these processes might still be in place, and the reasoning why they are in place may no longer apply anymore.
Yeah.
Like, you should ask why, because it may be time to change it to make it more scalable. Because back then it was just like put out the fire, right? Keep the fire out as long as possible. Don't fix the problem, just keep the fire out, right? And so, yeah, I like that advice. Keep asking why, because the reasoning, things have changed so much. The reasoning why something is done a certain way may no longer apply today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, when we were doing large projects, I'd use something called decision-driven design, and we'd actually document all the decisions. And to be honest, some were a 20-page white paper where you did detailed analysis. Other ones were a coin flip. And it's important to actually write down what the criteria was. If you have to come back and re-examine it, you know that, okay, well, yeah, here's why we chose it.
Yeah. We got heads, literally. That would be great.
That's
Like,
it.
that's how you figured this out? Like, oh, Thomas Edison tried a lot of different things.
Absolutely.
I have one last question for you. I probably should have asked it sooner when we were talking about your hobbies, but with so many hobbies that you have, is it your personality to just hyper focus on something and become good at it? Or do you become sort of a jack of all trades, master of none? In my head, I can't imagine you not being really good at all of these things. But do you ever feel like, gosh, I just never became that good enough at that one, and then I went on to another one? Or do you feel distracted? Do you almost like too many hobbies, like ADHD for hobbies? How do you deal with that?
So it very much is a serial hobby train. So I'll dive into something, and when you dive into something, you learn so much initially for probably that first 2 or 3 years. Like I jumped into windsurfing, and there's all these different moves and beach starts and water starts and be able to power jibe and all those things. And you get to a certain point where I'm either going to have to move to the gorge in Oregon or move to Maui on the shore there to progress. And, I got a job and a family, and that isn't going to work out. So that's kind of where I get to. And you get to that point where to really move on, you'd have to take a major career change. And then I move on to something else. So I love that initial phase of learning. And that is so much fun. And then taking many things I've learned from other elements and applying to those hobbies. Sometimes you can do things that have never been done because you're coming to it anew and you're bringing a lot of different experiences to that.
I appreciate that. Okay. I have had this problem myself. This is the reason I asked this, because I too have had so many hobbies to the point where like family will be like, huh, remember that one time where you like thought you could be a fisherman as a kid? And I was like, I was a fisherman. No, I didn't catch anything, but I fished and I had a lot of stuff for it. And I was obsessed with it. And then as an adult, I'm like, I think something's wrong with me. Like, am I unable to stick with something? Because I have friends that like, they have their thing. They like love pickleball and have forever and will probably never change for 20 years. And I'm like, why can't I be like that? Why can't I just stick with a hobby for 10 years? I'm going to chalk it up to liking that first stage of learning.
Well, but is it in being inquisitive and wanting to learn? I'd be honest, like it work if I ever had come in and I knew exactly what I was going to do for the next week or month. I would leave. I would be totally done. That's why I love research, because there's always something new you've never tried. You don't know how it's going to turn out. And the same thing with jumping in new hobbies. Boy, you don't know how it's going to turn out, and there's so much to learn. And that whole experience, I think, is fun. Um, I stayed with some things, but I like that initial part. That learning is so much fun.
Love that. Well, Dave, thank you so much again for your time. It was really nice to reconnect, and I'm excited to see what you do next in retirement. I know you've got a sweet bike trip planned for next year, so I can't wait to live vicariously through you. I hope one day that we actually get to meet up in person again. That would
That'd
be
be
really
great.
nice.
That'd be great. Jesse, and I'm living vicariously through your adventures. I love watching your India trip and how you approach travel and just the entire experience. And that is so much fun to watch. And that's how to travel. You're doing it right.
I I really appreciate that. Thank you. That was honestly, it was a dream come true. Something that I had on my bucket list for 12 years, and still today surprises me that I ever got to chase it and do it. So thank you.
Thank you, Jesse.